Flamenco in Sweden. Perhaps the most psychologically significant kind of movement that an individual can make is geographical relocation of his home. This dramatic form of geographical mobility is also strikingly evident in the United States and the other advanced nations. Speaking of the United States, Peter Drucker has said, "The largest migration in our history began during World War II, and it has continued ever since with undiminished momentum." And political scientist Daniel Elazar describes the great masses of Americans who have begun to move from place to place with each urban belt, preserving a nomadic way of life that is urban without being permanently attached to any particular city. Between March 1967 and March 1968, in a single year, 36,600,000 Americans, not counting children less than 1 year old, changed their place of residence. This is more than the total population of Cambodia, Ghana, Guatemala, Honduras, Iraq, Israel, Mongolia, Nicaragua and Tunisia combined. It is as if the entire population of all these countries had suddenly been relocated. A movement on this massive scale occurs every year in the United States. In each year since 1948, 1 out of 5 Americans changed his address, picking up his children, some household effects, and starting life anew at a fresh place. Even the great migration of history, the Mongol hordes, the westward movement of Europeans in the 19th century, seem puny by statistical comparison. While this high rate of geographical mobility in the United States is probably unmatched anywhere in the world, available statistics, unfortunately, are spotty. Even in the more tradition-bound of the advanced countries, the age-old ties between man and place are being shattered. Thus, The New Society, a social science journal published in London, reports that the English are a more mobile race than perhaps they thought. No less than 11% of all the people in England and Wales in 1961 had lived in their present usual residence less than a year. In certain parts of England, in fact, it appears that the migratory movements are nothing less than frenetic. In Kensington, over 25% had lived in their homes less than a year. In Hampstead, 20%. In Chelsea, 19%. And Anne Lapping, in another issue of the same journal, states that new house owners expect to move house many more times than their parents. The average life of a mortgage is 8 to 9 years. This is only slightly different from in the United States. In France, a continuing housing shortage contrives to slow down internal mobility, but even there a study by demographer Guy Borcher suggests that each year 8 to 10% of all Frenchmen shift homes. In Sweden, Germany, Italy and the Netherlands, the rate of domestic migration appears to be on the rise, and all Europe is experiencing a wave of international mass migration unlike anything since the disruptions of World War II. Economic prosperity in Northern Europe has created widespread labour shortages, except in England, and has attracted masses of unemployed agricultural workers from the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern countries. They come by the thousands from Algeria, Spain, Portugal, Yugoslavia and Turkey. Every Friday afternoon, 1,000 Turkish workers in Istanbul clamber aboard a train heading north towards the promised lands. The cavernous rail terminal in Munich has become a debarkation point for many of them, and Munich now has its own Turkish-language newspaper. In Cologne, at the huge Ford factory, fully 1/4 of the workers are Turks. Other foreigners have fanned out through Switzerland, France, England, Denmark, and as far north as Sweden. Not long ago, in the 12th century town of Pangbourne in England, my wife and I were served by Spanish waiters, and in Stockholm we visited the Vival, a downtown restaurant that has become a meeting place for transplanted Spaniards who hunger for flamenco music with their dinner. There were no Swedes present. With the exception of a few Algerians and ourselves, everyone spoke Spanish. It was no surprise, therefore, to find that Swedish sociologists today are torn by debate over whether foreign worker populations should be assimilated with Swedish culture or encouraged to retain their own cultural traditions, precisely the same melting pot argument that excited American social scientists during the great period of open immigration in the United States. Migration to the future. There are, however, important differences between the kind of people who are on the move in the United States and those caught up in the European migrations. In Europe, most of the new mobility can be attributed to the continuing transition from agriculture to industry, from the past to the present, as it were. Only a small part is as yet associated with the transition from industrialism to super-industrialism. In the United States, by contrast, the continuing redistribution of population is no longer primarily caused by the decline of agricultural employment. It grows instead out of the spread of automation and the new way of life associated with super-industrial society, the way of life of the future. This becomes plain if we look at who is doing the moving in the United States. It is true that some technologically backward and disadvantaged groups, such as urban Negroes, are characterised by high rates of geographical mobility, usually within the same neighbourhood or county. But these groups form a relatively small slice of the total population, and it would be a serious mistake to assume that high rates of geographical mobility correlate only with poverty, unemployment, or ignorance. In fact, we find that people with at least 1 year of college education, an ever-increasing group, move more and further than those without. Thus we find that the professional and technical population are more among the most mobile of all Americans. And we find an increasing number of affluent executives who move far and frequently. It is a house joke among executives of the International Business Machine Corporation that IBM stands for. I've been moved. In the emerging super-industrialism, it is precisely these groups, professional, technical and managerial, who increase in both absolute number and as a proportion of the total workforce. They also give the society its characteristic flavour, as the denim-clad factory worker did in the past. Just as millions of poverty-stricken and unemployed rural workers are flowing from the agricultural past into the industrial present in Europe, so thousands of European scientists, engineers and technicians are flowing into the United States and Canada, the most super-industrial of nations. In West Germany, Professor Rudolf Mossbauer, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, announces that he is thinking of migrating to America because of disagreements over administrative and budgetary policies at home. Europe's political ministers, worried over the technology gap, have looked on helplessly as Westinghouse, Allied Chemical, Douglas Aircraft, General Dynamics and other major American corporations sent talent scouts to London or Stockholm to lure away everyone from astrophysicists to turbine engineers. But there is a simultaneous brain drain inside the United States, with thousands of scientists and engineers moving back and forth like particles in an atom. There are, in fact, well-recognised patterns of movement. Two major streams, one from the north and the other from the south, both converge in California and the other Pacific coast states, with a midway station at Denver. Another major stream flows up from the south towards Chicago and Cambridge, Princeton and Long Island. A counter stream carries men back to the space and electronics industries in Florida. A typical young space engineer of my acquaintance quit his job with RCA at Princeton to go to work for General Electric. The house he had purchased only 2 years before was sold. His family moved into a rented house just outside Philadelphia, while a new one was built for them. They will move into this new house, the fourth in about 5 years, provided he is not transferred or offered a better job elsewhere. And all the time, California beckons. There is a less obvious geographical pattern on the movement of management people, but if anything, the turnover is heavier. A decade ago, William White, in The Organisation Man, declared that the man who leaves home is not the exception in American society, but the key to it. Almost by definition, the organisation man is a man who left home and kept on going. His characterisation, correct then, is even truer today. The Wall Street Journal refers to corporate gypsies in an article headlined "How Executive Family Adapts to Incessant Moving About Country." It describes the life of M.E. Jacobson, an executive with the Montgomery Ward retail chain. He and his wife, both 46 at the time the story appeared, had moved 28 times in 26 years of married life. "I almost feel like we're just camping," his wife tells her visitors. While their case is atypical, thousands like them move on the average of once every 2 years, and their members multiply. This is true not merely because corporate needs are constantly shifting, but also because top management regards frequent relocation of its potential successors as a necessary step in their training. This moving of executives from house to house as if they were life-sized chessmen on a continent-sized board has led one psychologist to propose facetiously a money-saving system called the Modular Family. Under this scheme, the executive not only leaves his house behind, but his family as well. The company then finds him a matching family, personality characteristics carefully selected to duplicate those of his wife and children left behind at the new site. Some other itinerant executive then plugs into the family left behind. No one appears to have taken the idea seriously, yet. In addition to the large groups of professionals, technicians and executives who engage in a constant round of musical homes, there are many other peculiarly mobile groupings in the society. A large military establishment includes tens of thousands of families who, peacetime and wartime, move again and again. "I'm not decorating any more homes," snaps the wife of an army colonel with irony in her voice. "The curtains never fit from one house to the next, and the rug is always the wrong size or colour. From now on, I'm decorating my car." Tens of thousands of skilled construction workers add to the flow. On another level are the more than 750,000 students attending colleges away from their home state, plus the hundreds of thousands more who are away from home but still within their home state. For millions, and particularly for the people of the future, home is where you find it.